Ladies and gentlemen, members of the panel, it's a pleasure not only for myself to be here tonight, but also to be here with Peter Firestone, my co-counsel, and my husband. And we did the trial, as many of you know, we did it together. Choice is very much a theme of this conference. It's also a very profound area of human contemplation and behavior. It is also an area that the law finds very difficult. Laws, lawmakers, legislation tend to see things as very black and white. It was the whole area that Evelyn Martins and that Peter Firestone and I struggled with following her arrest. Had to deal with an interpretation of a section of the criminal code that essentially had not been interpreted before. Evelyn Martins' arrest was the first time Section 241 of the criminal code, both the counseling of suicide and allegations of aiding or abetting a suicide, were used on a person in Canada. Her trial was in fact the second trial to take place in Canada, second in British Columbia, but it was the first one of its nature. It was the first one in which an individual who was alleged to be a member of a national organization, who was sitting with individuals, not just a single person, in the context of illness, suicide, and death, people having made a choice that it was their time to die. So it was an area that was not well trodden. It was an area in which a law, in essence, had to be made. Both Evelyn and the other individual, a woman by the name of Zeros, chose juries. And as some of you may know, when juries deliberate and they give a verdict, there aren't reasons for the verdict. In other words, lawyers depend a great deal on precedent when judges make decisions, and in making their decisions, judges write down the reasons why they come to the decision they do. Juries do not. Juries deliberate, they are fact finders, and they come to a conclusion, they come into the courtroom, and they tell you what their verdict is. In trials with judge alone, what we have is we have building of jurisprudence. Judge says this is the reason why a person was acquitted or convicted. What we do have in jury trials is we have a charge to the jury in which a judge sitting with the jury explains to the jury what the law is and how once they found certain facts, what the law that they must apply may be under any particular section of the criminal code. So we had the benefit of a judge who had previously given a charge to a jury with respect to what's aiding and abetting suicide in Canada. And we were able to work with the judge in order to tweak, if you like, the law, in order to interpret it in a way that, to certainly Mr. Firestone and myself, made sense in a Canadian context. In a very simplistic way, the law in Canada, as we understand it now, as explained to the jury, is this. Section 241 of the Criminal Code provides that anyone who counsels suicide or who aids or abets a person committing suicide is guilty of a criminal offense in Canada, can be charged and can be convicted if, in fact, there was active intervention in the commission of that suicide, or if there was language used of such a nature to influence an individual to commit the act of suicide. Suicide was a crime in Canada for many years. The lawmakers in this country saw the light in 1972, and suicide was no longer a criminal act. However, from a lawyer's perspective, not too much thought was put into the decriminalization of suicide because we were left with a rather murky area and an odd situation where you had someone who could be charged with aiding and abetting a suicide, but oddly enough, suicide itself was not a crime. Aiding and abetting a bank robbery is not a problem. Aiding and abetting a murder, an assault, is not a problem because the fundamental act is itself a crime. Now we had a situation where you could be found guilty of aiding and abetting someone of doing something that in fact wasn't in and of itself criminal. And that was part of the underlying difficulties we had in coming up with a definition of assisted suicide that was to be used by the jury in coming to a verdict in this particular case. So we have a situation where the criminal code still has that section, and someone could be charged with the right facts of aiding and abetting someone in the commission of their death. One would hope now that the law enforcement agencies in Canada have taken note of this particular case, and in a situation where there's mere passive acquiescence, where the person who is with the individual who becomes the deceased is compassionate, is sitting there, as I implored the jury to find, and they did find in this case, that we should not have to be alone at the time of our death, and that the offering of compassion, while it may be in common parlance a form of help, it is not the kind of help that Parliament intended when they criminalized aiding and abetting a suicide. So that simply being with someone without active intervention to offer compassion and love and companionship at the end of their life should not and is not, if the Evelyn Martins trial stands for anything, a criminal act in this country. The counseling section was not tested in the context of the Evelyn Martins trial. Evelyn was charged with 2 counts of counseling, one with respect to each individual and 2 counts of aiding and abetting suicide. The counseling sections were actually dropped by the Crown prior to going to trial. So that is untrammeled water. One could hope that we have a constitutional protection in this country for freedom of expression, and that our discussions today, unlike in the southern states, as Dr. Spears pointed out, or, for example, the kind of manuals that one finds by Derek Humphrey, are not captured in a country such as Canada as forms of counseling. In other words, we are free to explore methods of a suicide, to talk about suicide, to debate issues of suicide, and that to conduct ourselves in that way in this country is not criminal. I think Crown's decision not to pursue that particular count in Evelyn's case was warranted because there weren't any facts to support it. But without legislative change that deals with the whole issue of physician-assisted suicide, or of whatever model we as a society decide that we want to put in place, the criminal code is the only guide that we have. There isn't any other legislative framework in Canada, or indeed in any of the provinces, if it were a medical issue and delegated to the provinces, that provides a framework in which this activity can be carried out. Palliative care is certainly an area that not only is growing in terms of its visibility, its audibility, the amount of money being put into palliative care and the proponents of palliative care. I understand that palliative care doctors in Oregon are cooperating with individuals in right-to-die societies so that there is an intermeshing of real choice, those individuals who want a palliative structure and those individuals who want control, as Dr. Spears so eloquently outlined for you this morning, that the fact that an individual embraces control over the end of their life, in fact, in many ways, starts a process of peaceful death. And those many people don't take advantage of the means that they're provided to end their life earlier than later, and the disease takes its course. But the choice that faces us as a society is a legislative choice. From my respectful position as a lawyer in this country, that we are all vulnerable, all of us who have any interest in this issue, all of us who feel that we should have a choice in how our lives end, under what circumstances, particularly if we are unfortunate enough to have a terminal illness, to be able to take and embrace in our hands the control of those moments, to be with our daughters and our sons and our parents, if that is what we want to, as Leanne Burchell's mother said to Evelyn Martins, that it's too bad a stranger had to be there to be compassionate in her last moments because I couldn't, because the law doesn't let me. And it's for us as a society to take this bull by the horns, to take it to Ottawa or to whomever will listen, and to get some legislative change. With the greatest of respect to those who are proponents of palliative care, it's not good enough from a legal perspective. The need for people to embrace and to take control of their life's end will go on. And it will simply become silent again if the voices don't keep ringing. And to simply say it can be managed within the existing framework, with the greatest of respect to those who feel that palliative care is the answer, is, from a legal perspective, to miss the point. Thank you.